One. Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 108. I'm your host, David J. Murphy. Joining me, as always, are my co-hosts, Zach Robert. Zach?
Yeah, hello. How goes it?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm alive.
Nice to hear. And my other co-host, Ron Hamilton. Ron, buddy, how you doing? All right. Great. Glad to hear it. Moving on. We've got a great show for you tonight. We're going to get right into it, and I'm proud to announce, again, one of the biggest guests we've ever had on the show, and obviously a person who I'm a big fan of, been a fan of for over a decade, a man who needs no introduction, but I have to do it anyways, the one and only Joe McNally. Joe, will you please tell the one person in our audience about yourself who may not know you?
Well, it's very kind words, guys, but basically, I'm a photographer. I've been a photographer for over 40 years, and you could end that sentence right there. I'm a photographer. That's the deal.
That's right.
It's a labor of love sometimes. It's a labor of madness sometimes. But I do love it, and I've been at it for a long time. Had my ups and downs, but the fact I'm still standing, I guess, is some sort of proof somehow that this can work out if you just stick with it.
Absolutely. Yes, just a photographer who's happened to work for Time, National Geographic, Sports Illustrated, Newsweek, Fortune, New York, Business Week, Life, Men's Journal, among others, and has also published 3 books. Just little stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I was blessed to. I guess everybody feels this way. They come into the field at a certain time, right? And that's the reality they confront. When I came into the field, magazines were in full cry, newspapers were alive and vibrant, and it was a process of, like, in certain simple terms, not the social media of today, the digital era, the websites, the podcasts, the this and that and the other thing that we all engage in today and assume is routine. My entry level into this business was fairly simple: show your work, try to get some assignments.
Well, you definitely showed quite a few assignments and got quite a bit of work. I was actually looking at your Wikipedia page here, and I noticed you haven't done a book since 2011, Sketching Light. Anything we can expect maybe coming down or in the pipe, just out of curiosity?
Yes, I'm working on a book right now for publication in probably late winter, meaning sort of early 2019. The tentative working title is The Real Deal. It's kind of an honest assessment of the life of a photographer. I talk about some work. I give myself grades, A through F. I talk about the reality that confronts us now as photographers, the joy of it, and also the absolutely occasionally soul crushing aspects of it. When people call you up and expect your work for nothing or whatever it might be. We don't need to go there right away,
but Joe, I'm sure you need exposure, right? I mean, that's better than anything else, right?
Yeah, exposure buys a lot of cheeseburgers.
And that'll be something we do talk about a little bit later. The exposure economy, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
Is
that like Bitcoin? Is exposure like Bitcoin? It's like,
it is, but it's negative value. It's
yes,
every coin you buy costs you money. It doesn't goes down in value. We should start that our own currency, like Kodak Cash,
Kodak coin.
Yeah, Kodak coin. Ooh, geez.
Yeah, let me get in on that. Ground floor of that. But we'll be talking about that a little bit later. That's one of our show topics, and if you want to talk about that sort of thing, that's like pretty much all we talk about almost every week on this show. Is like almost every topic, no matter what it is, it goes to exposure. Oh, I can't get paid. Oh, I never get paid. That's the usual modus operandi we get to. But no, we're going to talk about you, Joe. We're going to talk about specifically the first thing I want to talk about with you, because you've made your career on this. I think it's how I got introduced to you, and of course I read your all the great things that you've been a part of. But I think the most important thing, in my opinion, that you've been a part of is that you were a graduate of SI Newhouse School in Syracuse University, the alma mater, my alma mater. So I'm happy to that we are both schoolmates there in that degree. And I think that's probably why you came back to school to Newhouse to do your lighting workshops there. And that was actually my first interaction with you at the military photojournalism course. you doing a lighting workshop for us. Do you still do the lighting workshops at Syracuse?
I still have a relationship with Syracuse. Yes, it's a great program. Bruce Strong is running it now. He took it over from Tony Golden. I imagine Tony was the chairman when you were there, Dave.
Yes.
Yep. And I've always had a good connection with the place. I feel fondly about the place. They opened up a door to photography for me, and I walked through it, and 40 years later, I'm still doing it. So it was a good launching pad for sure. Also, in terms of an emotional connection, I was very close with Fred Demarest, who was the chairman of the photo department for a long time, and then retired, turned it over to Tony. Fred just passed away very sadly in his 90s. And
sorry to hear
it's
that.
the mark of a good teacher, you know, that I intersected with Fred. I was kind of aimless, as we all were back in school, you know, kind of all full of like, what am I going to do, and all that sort of stuff, and never knowing which way to exactly turn. And Fred really helped shape some of my thinking and directed me, was kindly and patient. And I remained close to him right to his death. I went to visit him in hospice. I sat with him, and then went to his funeral. And as I said at his funeral, I was asked to say a few words. There's no telling, you know, how powerful the gift of a good teacher can be in someone's life when you intersect with them. And that was certainly the case with Fred and I. He was a wonderful teacher.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I have many fond memories of the teachers I had, but that sounds like a very strong connection there.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome. Sorry, of course, to have him pass, but you know, if he left that kind of lasting impact on you, then he must have made that kind of difference on many, many people, I would assume.
Absolutely. I mean, he started the Syracuse Photo J program. He mixed the chemicals. He was the only professor, you know, and then it grew. Look at where it is now. There's like, faculty of maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15 people. I don't even know. And thousands of photography students have gone through that program now.
Yeah, it's world renowned. I mean, that's why the military chose it for, you know, their training platform for their members. But, you know, of course, again, like you said, you taught me a lot about Flash. You know, I've been, like I said, I've been to multiple workshops that you've taught, and you're always doing great stuff with Flash. So, you know, I want to talk from a visual journalism standpoint. You know, I think we as photographers or photojournalists sometimes get intimidated by Flash. And, you know, from your perspective, what is your sort of take on Flash in general as a tool? You know, not just talking about like studio lights, and obviously, obviously, what can you say about those? Would love to know what you can say about, you know, studio lights with regard to things like portraiture. But from a visual journalism standpoint, just having the strobe and doing things with it, you know, to kind of capture things in interesting ways. Sort of, what has been your experience working with Flash, and what do you tell people who may be intimidated by Flash, you know, to kind of help them get over that?
Well, you know, it's just another way to express light, and our lives are wrapped around the phenomenon of light, you know, and, you know, Flash can be absolutely appropriate at certain times and absolutely inappropriate at others. You know, if you're in the mix in a sensitive situation, if you're covering something in a completely documentary fashion, Flash probably should remain in your camera bag. But on the other hand, if you are pushed to the wall and light is not available to you, I think one of the things that photographers have to be conversant with is the subtle use of Flash, the appropriate use of Flash, and to not be afraid of it. And I think a lot of photographers, you know, maybe try their first, you know, Flash pictures or something like that, experiment, and then it's uncertain, and the results are predictably awful, right? My first results were Flash were like, let's call them not memorable, shall we, gang? You know, and then they put the Flash down and say, well, you know, I'm an available light photographer, which is also fine. It's a totally fine approach. I have always felt that, not to use a turn of a phrase here, but photography is a giant umbrella under which lots of different styles and genres can comfortably live together, jostle up against each other. I said it actually just recently. I was lecturing at CES, and I'm sure you guys are familiar, you know, you guys are on the net a lot, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with, I don't know what you might call them, sort of vituperative strains of thought, you know, like really formidable, like I would never do this. that guy doesn't, he always, I mean, this kind of dogma that lurks around out there. I think as a professional photographer, you don't have the benefit of dogma. You have to become what the assignment requires you to become. I've been a general assignment magazine photographer for most of my career. And that means I've shot news, sports, celebrities, politics, medicine, science, technology. And I had to embrace an entire range of solutions to get my head around that assigning kind of discipline that I was confronted with. So Flash just came naturally to me in terms of like, this is just another tool. I have to get to know how to use it, just like I got to know how to use my camera. And that's probably too many words. I'm sorry for that, but I'll shut up now. I'll just sit over here and flash. No. I'll flash in the corner by myself.
I have a love-hate relationship with Flash personally. I mean, I tend to go flashless in most instances. I have the GH5, which doesn't even have a pop-up flash, so I haven't. If I don't have a need for it, I don't usually whip it out. But let me throw it to you guys. I mean, how do you use Flash, and do you think there's ever an instance where use of Flash is unethical, and where do you kind of draw that ethical guideline when how you use Flash in visual journalism? Zach, you want to throw it out?
Unethical. I don't know about unethical necessarily, but
I'm not saying that it's unethical.
No, but I think just unethical versus inappropriate or something like that. I mean, I think I've told this story before. I was covering a memorial for one of the Paris attacks in New York. And there was a photojournalist who literally walked across the memorial and held the flash in his hand and got 6-7 inches away from the guy's face and photographed him. And it was like the rest of us photographers are standing there like, what is going on? But I mean, even in that scenario, I don't know if it's necessarily inappropriate. It all depends on use. Personally, my SB 900 is sitting over there, probably has about 1/4 inch of dust on it. Because unfortunately, which is something I'm beginning to realize that I have to, this is actually a very time appropriate guest, Joe, for you to come on, because I've been realizing that my complete inability of being able to use a flash or lighting in general is not only just it's kind of closed off my career where I'm going, but also the fact that we both shoot Nikon, I assume, and the fact that you can get away with almost in any scenario now. I just got the D750, and it's very rare that I'm like, I wish I had extra light anymore, because of the ISO is just so insane. I mean, it's just the ability to go through, and I haven't even gotten to the D850 yet, where I assume you can just actually photograph in completely pitch dark scenarios. You can it actually provides light to the scenario, but which I think is obviously it's great for most of the work I do, which is a lot of protest work and activism type stuff. But I do wish that I could, within the right scenario, be able to use Flash. Maybe not to the extent that like Scott Peterson or something does for time. It was a Time or Newsweek, but certainly wish I could use it in a tight spot. But
speaking of the D850, Zach, I'm sorry, Joe, you can probably talk to it. You used it recently on that whole mud warrior athlete shoot. What are your thoughts on the D850? Is it the second coming of Nikon camera equipment? As a Nikon ambassador, I'm sure you have to say good things, but what do you think about the camera, in terms of its capabilities?
Well, I'll be straight up honest with you. Even if I wasn't a Nikon ambassador, I'd be in love with the camera. It's a great camera. One of the things about having a relationship, as quite a number of us do, with Nikon, they solicit opinions and whatnot, and one of the opinions I had, pie in the sky questions get asked. Well, design your camera of the future, and I was at a point where I was using my D5s as a workhorse camera. Great camera, fast, tough. I used them at the Rio Olympics.
Right.
There was an instance, for instance, flash was not only inappropriate. Yeah. Using a flash as a photographer during the Olympics will get you thrown out.
Oh wow.
And not allowed to use a flash. So for 3 weeks. I was just straight up available light. Now shooting ISO 8,000, 10,000 with, as you know, was just indicated, amazing results.
Yeah.
So so there's that. But the D850 has become a camera where a lot of different elements come together. As I said, I have my D5 workhorse camera. I was using my D810 for high-res portraiture. I was using my D500 for certain convenience features, like the pop-up LCD and things like that. And so I just said, you know, it would be great if there was a camera that put all those things together.
Yeah.
So now you have a camera that's fast and high-res. And for me, which is important, it operates fully and completely the SB5000 radio TTL system. Okay, it's no longer a line of sight. And then it has this other wonderful stuff like a pop-up LCD, you know, things that were associated with D500, which is a camera I really like as well. So the D850 is now our go-to camera. You know, I'm going on location on Monday for 2 weeks, and I'll only have D850 with me.
Wow. So would you say you prefer the D850 or the D5, or they each have their own specific skills for specific shoots, and you choose the one that best suits the shoot?
I think you choose the one. You know, again, if I was getting into a very tough, you know, situation like an Olympics, where I'm going to batter the cameras all day long. You know, you're walking at the Olympics, you got a 600, a 2-4, a 70-200. You got 3 cameras. They're banging around. You're on a bus with a whole bunch of other photographers. Everything's just like crashing into each other. At the closing ceremonies of the Olympics was in a downpour, like a 3-hour downpour. Wow. And I tried my best to cover up, you know, but by the end of a couple hours, everything's wet. And those cameras just kept on working. So, wow, you know, it's not like the D5 is going to sit on my shelf.
Right.
But my bailiwick right now, the arc of my assigning work is a lot of portraiture, wow, commercial work, and resolution is unbeatable in that camera.
And it's like, what, a 37 or 40 something? I can't remember how many megapixels is it?
I think it's like 47.5. Don't completely quote me on that, but it's in that ballpark, please.
Quote, unquote. Okay. Well, speaking of...
Joe McNally, I said on the internet last night that the D850 has 77 megapixels.
It'll blow up on social media.
45.7.
Hey, you're close. Very close, Joe.
Oh, I think I transposed to now. I said 47.5 or something like that.
There you go. We'll allow it. We'll allow it.
All right.
You don't lose your you lose your NPS membership. Don't worry.
Right. I'll get a mulligan on that one.
But you know, since we're talking about Flash, let's go right into you know, the thing that you actually designed to help us all get better Flash. It's a portable softbox that goes on top of, you know, your speed light or your portable flash, and it's got your name on it. So talk to us a little bit about the Joe McNally EasyBox Speedlight 2 Plus. Kind of how did this kind of thing come about? What's it like to design a product for a company like Manfrotto, and kind of what does this thing do?
Well, the folks at Manfrotto and Last Light are super helpful, and they're super attuned to what photographers need. They try to be, you know, obviously manufacturing concerns move at a certain pace, but not to go back into long ago history, but they were making and still do make a thing called an EasyBox softbox, a hot shoe softbox that's 24 inches, and it was a silver interior softbox, and I was using it, and I was getting this, you know, I felt the light was a little brassy, a little shiny, you know, and I said, why don't you make it in a white one? I wrote them a letter, and they were like, ha, ha, ha. And they said, that's an interesting idea. And I think I kept after them, and lo and behold, they finally, you know, maybe just to kind of say, this guy is not going to stop, they sent me one. They made one that had a white interior. And then eventually they sent their designer over to one of my workshops, and I shot a silver one, same model, shot a white one, same model, same position, all that sort of stuff. And he looked and he said, I think we're going to start making the white one. And that was the beginning of the relationship. And now, numbers of years later, we were looking for something mutually that had some of the luxury components, if you will, of a bigger softbox, but something that would stuff in your bag. Right. And hence the Speedlight 2 came about. It's got an interior baffle. And also, importantly, I lobbied for an egg crate. It's a separate front that corrals the light. Some people will refer to it as a fabric grid, generally associated with much bigger lights, you know, but it actually really works. It's a more complete look. You can take the grid and the softbox and stuff them in your bag, and they're very reasonably priced, and it gives you actually a very sophisticated look of the light, even though it's a tiny little speed light box. I mean, let's face it, it's never going to be a 6-foot octa, you know, right. It's never going to grow up. It's always going to be a portable, easygoing light shaper, but for a small box, it is a really nice quality of light.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I've got some of these other type of boxes. What would you say sets your box apart? You know, obviously from, you know, obviously being designed by you and whatnot, but there is, you know, is there specific aspects of it, you know, besides the grid and whatnot that sort of set your box apart from other boxes out there? Like, how would you kind of set yours apart from the other ones?
Sure. I mean, it's well made, for one thing. Manfrotto, Lastalite, they have standards. You know, it's manufactured in the UK. It's not a knockoff box. You know, there's lots of knockoff products out there in the world of photography. Right. And they can work sometimes, or they can not work. I'm not making judgment calls, but right. The Speedlight box is well made. And then the interior baffle helps. Some of the lights have that or don't. The diffuser front also has a deep baffle. It's about a 2-inch baffle, and I lobbied for that as well. A lot of the smaller boxes are just a flat front. Light tends to go this way as well as this way. So the corral, if you will, that the baffle gives that light directionalizes it, and then you rip that off and slap on the separate front that it has the fabric egg crate, and you have an even more controllable light source that will just splash in a more narrow and confined space. So I think for touch-tone control kind of thing, I think it's kind of head and shoulders above some of the other stuff that's out there.
No, it definitely looks like a high-quality piece of equipment. I love the adjustable bracket on the back. I think that's pretty neat because I've seen other systems that use just kind of like Velcro and stuff. And you got to like put Velcro on your flash, and that's never, you know, attractive. But is this the beginning of sort of a Joe McNally series of equipment? Is this the start of something? Are we going to see Joe McNally tripods and Joe McNally whatever cameras in the future? The Joe by Nikon in the future, perhaps?
McDonald's Happy Meal toys as well.
Yeah, we're currently working on a 2,000 millimeter f1.0 lens that'll be out sometime in the next millennium. It'll be posthumously attributed to me. No, I'm joking, obviously. No, there is a signature line in the last. If you go to Manfrotto, hit their various lines. Lastalite has what they call the Joe McNally signature range, and there's about I think there's 6 or 7 products there.
Wow!
And we've worked together. Collaboration with the manufacturer on stuff like this is actually kind of fun, you know, because I'm sure you guys have all experienced, as photographers have for many years, like input, like hello, listen to us, engineers are wonderful people, love them, that's why we have a camera like the D850, but engineers are not photographers. They don't go out and try to shoot those cameras in a driving downpour at the finish of the Kentucky Derby, So we have valuable information to offer in terms of how those products work in the field.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just looking at your other options here. A lot of different great things. The Tri-Flash, that looks pretty neat. The Uplight. So a lot of great stuff there going on. So, all right, great. We'll look forward to seeing what else comes out of the mind of Joe McNally. Definitely be looking on that.
Be careful what you wish for.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to get that 2,000 millimeter f1.0 lens. I'm sure that'll be cheap and affordable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's when you really need to get your own intern as well. Just interns to carry it.
Yeah. It's very.
It comes with its own intern. It should be when you purchase the lens.
Yeah. And a flatbed rail car just to
exactly.
There you go. All right. Well, we like to talk about news on this show, and of course, the biggest news that I saw coming out with regard to the world of visual journalism was the announcement of the 2017 World Press Photo Contest winners. And I think, these, obviously represent the best of the best within the world, at least the imagery that hopefully wasn't manipulated. But again, I think a lot of this imagery I've seen before. Some of it is brand new to me. But of course, I would say the winner is a picture that when it first came out, I think we all, immediately saw this as being like, yep, this is going to be an award-winning photo right here. And of course, it's the one by Burhan. I'm going to mess up his last name. Bleachi. And it's the photograph of course, the gunman who assassinated a politician, I believe, a Russian ambassador, and Andrei Karlov, at an art gallery in Ankara. And it's a beautiful shot. It's when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this must be like a shot from a movie still or something like that. It was so just like perfectly composed and whatnot, or I thought it was fake, or I thought it was something. But no, it's just the wonderful mixture of course, being in the right place at the right time. So what do you guys think of this as sort of the winner of the World Press Photo Contest competition? And what do you think of the winners in general? Were there any other images that struck out to you as being particularly noteworthy and obviously deserving of the prize? Zach or Joe?
Eddie, go ahead, Zach.
I think that this is last year's, Dave.
2017 photo contest?
Yeah, it would be 2018 would be the 2017 ones. I just applied for the World Press Photos, so I'm pretty sure. But I mean,
they're announcing the best photos of 2017. This is the 2017 photo contest.
Okay.
This just came out. I swear to God.
Okay.
This was actually this. I think there was a story about this on Petapixel. That's where I got the link for it.
Okay. I mean that photo. The winner is absolutely spectacular. I mean, if you read the stories behind it, and how he got the shot, and just I don't know whether it be bravery or stupidity, the combo of the two, which I think is kind of essential for every photojournalist, to get a photo like that was just incredible. And the fact that it's sharp and it's in focus, it has the right lighting, and yeah, there's been a lot of really fantastic interviews with this photographer that I recommend checking out, because like he's just talking about the moment, and it definitely deserved to win that award.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach, I'm beginning to think these are last year's winners.
Yeah. I'm like, I just applied, and I applied for, or not applied, but submitted my photos for World Press. So yeah, and I think that was from 2016. They're always a year behind. But yeah.
All right, well, we'd like to talk about old news here on Around the Lens. Hey, you know what? Joe's to give us your thoughts on these winners from last year. What are your favorite photos?
Well, I've been through the gallery. It's not necessarily the world I live in too much anymore. The World Press is really relentlessly, as it should be, a hardcore photojournalist, kind of arena to play in. And that photograph by Burhan it's an incredible. It's that rawness that really gets you, that scream of defiance as he holds up the gun, and the act to be there and to actually witness that as it develops. It reminds me of from many years ago, there was a historically important black and white photograph, and I think it was in 1960. I just kind of looked it up. The assassination of a Japanese prime minister. A young student or a candidate for prime minister, a student jumped on stage. He was speaking, and he killed him with a traditional Japanese sword.
Yeah.
So the moment that occurs, where political, fervor runs so high that it prompts people to violence, that is always distressing. It's even more indicative, I think, of the times that we live in, and how radically polarized we are, and that's a very distressing thing. The one positive or a very positive thing I saw in those field of awards was Daniel Behurilak. I'm probably not pronouncing his name. I've never met him, but he's a hell of a photographer. He did the mayhem in the Philippines with the assassinations of sanctioned, basically assassinations of the drug dealers, et cetera, and the Duarte regime there, and the blood on the streets. Just very raw coverage, very, very powerful, well witnessed, and he deserves a tip of the hat because that's a tough coverage to come across with.
Yeah, his I think he also either won or was a runner up for a Pulitzer as well. And his work, I remember seeing it in the New York Times Magazine, was just actually seeing that work in print too is just absolutely incredible in a glossy, which is, as you know, like I entered the world right as all photojournalism world right as all these places were going away, and print magazines weren't happening anymore. But the few times you actually get to see real amazing photojournalism, what do you think about like the awards in general? Like, because I had this struggle, not only spending the money, but also just the time, the massive amount of time it takes to submit the awards. Do you think that they're worth it for photojournalists in general, or I mean photographers in general? Because I mean, there's more than, PDN has a wide range of awards as well, but it's always a tough choice because I mean some of the submission costs are like $50 a pop, and for a freelancer like myself, that's a lot.
Yeah, I hear you. I actually think they're more important than ever, in a way, because what they do is they take the beautiful thing about the awards is that it is very global. As I looked through the roll call of winners, a lot of them are younger photojournalists from all over the place: Russia, Pakistan, the Far East, etc. And given the dearth of potential opportunities that are out there in print journalism right now, the Daniel stuff in the New York Times Sunday Magazine, I saw it. The Times Sunday Magazine did a great job with that, absolutely great job, and it was powerfully rendered. But a lot of folks find themselves without a platform, except maybe their website or some sort of digital site that maybe doesn't get that much traffic. So I think now this forum that the World Press gives photographers is even more important, because it can take someone who's really labored mightily and produced a strong set of photographs. It can give them additional voice and give them a platform to express. And as I always said to any young photographer, like, awards literally don't mean anything except as they might open a door for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You walk into somebody who has money, who can maybe fund a project, and you say, well, I just won the World Press, and I won this, and I won that, and you have this list of things. It could possibly turn the door in your favor or tip the scales. That can open up an avenue, add to your reputation, increase your visibility, so that it can enable you literally to keep doing that which you are good at doing. Yeah.
I've been thinking, because you're looking at when you look at the like a couple of them actually announce who the judges are, and like, to me, that's one reason I kind of justify the amount of time and sometimes money and effort that you have to go through. Like the World Press photo as well, like I submitted through them, and it was just, there's this like the system, the behind the scenes system to actually upload the images and everything like that was just like kind of terrifying, that I was going to screw something up and then go through the whole process, and not that I think I'm even going to have a chance at it, but like end up not even having a chance of winning because I messed something up stupidly. But the chance that, at least if nothing else, I know that at least theoretically those judges are looking at my images, and even if I don't win or place or whatever, that I'm putting photos in front of those people who it's like I don't have access to necessarily have access to some of the judges at National or the editors at National Geographic and things like that. I mean, that's difficult to get into those connections really. But the chance that at least they'll have my name and my info and my website and my bio right next to that, and even if they decide that it's not an award winner, they'll have Zach, that's the guy that took that photo. At least that hopefully that'll be amongst the 10,000 people that submit. At least hopefully they'll remember that.
It can put you in front of. I mean, the jury is an excellent jury as always, and I think it's important that they maintain what they're doing, which is a mix of people.
Yeah.
It's not just photo editors. There's art directors from a whole variety of disciplines, and there's photographers. People who like David Burnett has been involved in the past, for instance, a widely respected photojournalist. So and many others, obviously too. But so there's a good mix of influences that I think can provide like a check and balance, on the certain instincts in the jury. And I think collectively they come out with a really fair and balanced sort of assessment of photographers' work.
Yeah.
You brought up something interesting, the foot in the door, right? Obviously winning a world press photo, winning a contest does put your foot in the door. It doesn't guarantee you anything, like you said. With you, and this will roll into our next topic, but, with you being Joe, who you are and what you've done and your sort of credibility and your sort of history, do you find it easier to get, sorry, my son is making noise. Do you find it easier, like, to get assignments that you want, or is it still an issue for you, even though you are who you are? Does it still people will, obviously take the time to talk to you and listen to your ideas because you're Joe McNally, but does it necessarily, turn into more things down the road in terms of like projects and actually what you want to do? Or do you find it, just as difficult as anybody else to kind of get something off the ground? Like how much does sort of, celebrity, if you will, for a better word, or, I would say just not celebrity, but, credibility lend itself to your being able to do what you want to do work-wise?
Good question. Certainly longevity in the business and maintaining a certain level of reputation is important, across the board for all matters or all aspects of this business. Occasionally I can get a foot in the door, perhaps more easily because of that longevity, or perhaps, a bit of reputation proceeds before me. But for instance, today, I ran up to Boston to show a portfolio at an ad agency, and they were wonderful. I was really happy to have the appointment. It's rare actually to get in to see the creatives of an ad agency because they're so frightfully busy. And they were like, wow, okay, yeah, no, I hadn't seen that. Oh, cool. Oh, so what do you, so you are this or you, and they had questions. I mean, so what got their attention was a mailer that we sent out that had medical imagery on it. I did a book for the what is now known as the Northwell Medical System. It's the biggest set of hospitals in the New York City metropolitan area. And, it was a wonderful assignment because I was able to apply journalistic instincts, storytelling instincts. I did a lot of medical coverages for the National Geographic, for instance, over the years, and the book turned out really well. And so we used that material to put out and see if we could get more attention. And, honestly, they couldn't have cared less if it was, Joe or Zach, or they were intrigued by the work. So that's always the bottom line. But yeah, occasionally, maybe somebody would pick up the phone who might not, if you're cold calling, an editor. Well, most of the editors, in this business on some level, I might have known, or might take that call or not. Depending on the nature of my last job for them, So yeah, it's a mix of things. The bottom line with this is that you have to keep your eye in the camera. You have to keep shooting good stuff, and you have to keep your shoulder to the wheel. Nothing ever really gets easier. You
can never rest on your laurels, so to speak, right?
No, the people who do fall by the wayside. You start to believe your own press clippings. That's like, man, that's one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel.
It's always depressing when you realize that very few people know your name as a photographer, because, you know, whether it be, you know, you could literally have that big ad campaign, you could have that big front cover, but even if you have the cover of the Time magazine, you know, and it's a big thing, your name isn't anywhere on the cover. Usually it's on the inside. There's a byline. I know where to look. Photographers usually know where to look, but it's sad because, I mean, I was at a Magnum show or late last year, and it was, you know, it was 50th anniversary retrospective show, and I'm walking around there and I go, I know all of these images. I'm really ashamed as a person who, you know, lives in this industry. I don't know any of their names. And, you know, and it's just like, and so, yeah, it's tough to, as much as branding helps and all that jazz, a little bit, but, you know, for the people that are important, it's always questionable, or whether the audience actually has any clue, or whether they care. That's the thing always the thing that's dangerous.
as you know, in my position, you know, there's a folk musician who has a really beautiful song I'd love to put some pictures to, and just show it very privately at workshops or something like that. Not on the internet, nothing for sale or anything like that. And I even offered to do his portrait, you know, and we've been trying to get an answer from this gentleman for a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we've talked to his agent. We've gotten a letter back from his label. Nothing.
Yeah.
Zero. And this is not, you know, this is not Bono, you know.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. He's a really cool, great, you know, for me, I love his music. He's on Facebook, you know, he plays small gigs, not a high powered dude who's playing in front of 20,000 people at a shot. I can't get an email back.
Wow.
You know?
I know.
So what I think from my end is a very simple request, but it may be more complicated than you know. You know, the label may be involved, the agent may be involved. We had a situation where I photographed an incredibly well-known actress, and I won't say the name. And years later, she's in a film. And it turned out that one of the pictures I made of her was one of her favorite pictures. And so in this film that she came up in, she was much older than when I originally photographed her. And they wanted a print to put on a mantelpiece so that she would have kind of a moment of retrospection. On the film, she'd stop by and look at this framed picture and kind of look at, oh, I used to be pretty, you know, or whatever that was going through her head. So we got contacted, and my studio manager, Lynn, is an amazing individual. She's been with me for 26 years. She handles the business aspects of the studio. So they contact us and they say, we'd love to use this picture in the movie. And Lynn confers with me, and we said, look, you know, we got along well. Tell her they can use it for free with our blessing as a thank you to the actress. You know, we got along well. Please, you know, it's on screen for 2 seconds. Yeah. And they said, oh, that's fantastic. We're going to send you an agreement. Well, they send through an all rights buyout. And we get back and say, we really can't sign this. And they said, oh, we're not going to use these rights. It's just going to be on screen for like 3 seconds. And we said, all right, well, let's send us a contract that states that. Oh, no, we have to have an all rights buyout.
Wow.
So Lynn and I were like, and we ended up not going forward with them. And Lynn and I were like laughing. We're trying to give them the picture for free.
Yeah.
And we can't.
Yeah. That's maddening. I've been with that for other things as well. And it's just like, I can't give you, can't give you everything because we don't know what you're going to do, or if, you know, because this, especially with studios or publishing companies now, you know, a different, you know, even if I just do that for, you know, even Time magazine or something like that, well, Time is owned by, you know, by 12 other companies that could then go ahead and do that. You know, MSNBC wanted that for a documentary. And I was just like, well, I can give you specific rights, but if I give MSNBC rights, that means NBC has it. That means Comcast, everything under the sun. And it's like, well, that literally could mean the end of that photo ever being anything. So,
well, look at the National Geographic. It got sold to Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah.
You know,
we talked about that on the show. That was kind of, we were kind of concerned about that.
Yeah. And then in turn, I think I'm not sure of this, but I think it's in turn now in the process of being sold as the package of Fox at Disney.
Right.
Yeah. It's gonna be weird.
So whoever, when I first picked up a camera for the National Geographic in the late 80s, did I ever think the National Geographic would be sold?
Yeah.
Bought by an Australian, media baron.
Yeah.
And
now owned by Mickey Mouse.
And now owned by Disney, which owns like 25% of the media industry now, at least. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll work for Disney at some point.
These are surprising developments for sure.
I'm interested because you said you tried to give it to them for free. They wanted the all rights thing. When they asked for the all rights, did you think, well, we can't give you all the rights, but we can sell you all the rights? Like, did you ever think, like, let me throw a dollar figure out then? Fine. If we're going to give you all rights, we might as well get money for it.
We did. We sent them an appropriately priced response to an all rights buyout, and they immediately turned it down and said, that's ridiculous.
Oh my God.
And the thing that you worry about is that maybe it gets back to the actress. Like, oh, the photographer was a complete asshole. He wanted so much money.
He wanted money for his work. How dare he?
So you just move on. You smile and nod and you move on.
Yeah. What you do is you should find that film and have somebody like digitally add your photograph to it, and just for your personal library, like, that's the Joe McNally cut.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Joe, we talked about resting on your laurels and stuff. You can never do that. But was there ever any time in your career as you were coming up and you'd hit these sort of, I would say, real big milestone moments? Having covers of New York, National Geographic, having the giant Polaroid 9/11 stuff, where you thought like, oh, I've obviously made it, and I can just kind of sit back and the jobs will come to me? Or was there always that like internal, you always have to hustle because they'll never come to you? Or was there ever a period of your life where you did kind of take a break because you thought, oh, this is it for me. I'm now going to get all the jobs, and it never came, and you came to that realization? Or you just know you always had to hustle?
You always have to hustle in this business. You always are. You can't just rest on the accolades that might or might not accumulate from your last job, even if you do a good job. The first cover story I shot for National Geographic, the contract was for 26 weeks of work, and I produced 42 pages on a cover, and it did extremely well, and Geographic was enormously pleased. And I thought, whoa, I really, all right, I'm just going to sit by the phone and watch that baby ring. Here we go, and it didn't. Because I had so relentlessly devoted myself for a full year, basically, to that project, that a lot of my other clients had gone elsewhere, or they weren't calling me. And I wrote about it a little bit, because I was like crippled almost. I was like, so imbued with the idea of this 42-page story. I was like asking the Fed. It was about the sense of sight, and I was asking the FedEx guy, or to come into the door, like, you want to see my sight story, dude? Like, no.
Just hold it up next to you.
Here's the thing. Yeah. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody gives a shit. That's why Ricky Gervais is really obnoxious. But he's funny. Yeah. And when he was at the Globes, he came out in his usual beery fashion with a pint, and his advice was to the winners. He says, please just get off the stage, in his English accent. He goes, because really, you want to thank everybody and you want to talk a little bit. No one cares. Absolutely no one cares, and that's what you have to assure yourself of as a photographer is, yes, does someone care? Ultimately, yeah, your picture connects with somebody. Yeah. I've had people come up and say, I remember this picture. Or I've taught a class where people have said, that class or that book really changed my direction of photography. And that's really wonderful. But the ego thing, nobody cares.
Yep. It's really dangerous too. Also, you talk about, just even dealing with when you have like a big thing and you have to like promote it, you have to whatever, disappearing from the scene to do that is so dangerous. I had a big viral photo this year that I ended up having to do, like, not having, I guess necessarily, but end up doing like 2 weeks of media for it. And then I realized my copyright lawyer was like, hey, you haven't uploaded anything to our site. Have you been shooting? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I forgot. Because now, like 6 months later, now that all the checks are in, you're like, Oh, I had that month-long gap in my time last year. That means that, the stuff I did 3 months ago, the checks aren't coming in now, which is how every freelancer lives.
Right.
And that's what's happening right now in my life, where it's like, oh, I really need to get out there right now and do as many jobs as humanly possible.
Yep, you got to stay behind the camera. That's what we're good at.
Yep.
So let's talk about getting work and getting paid for work. It's a common topic that we talk about on the show. Of course, the common currency people want to pay you with is exposure, and we always say, well, you'll die of exposure. And so it's the common sort of sentiment that, of course, don't ever give away your stuff for free, because that just devalues the work of the industry. But I saw a story here on Petapixel about a photographer who was offered by Time, which is, you worked for Time, Joe, which offered him, basically they want to use his video for free because they considered it, I think, user generated content, even though, he works, this is how he makes a living. So they wanted to give it, they wanted to give him nothing for his work except for some credit. And, I saw this story and it looked like every other story I've seen of, these major multi-million-dollar, media companies that obviously have the budgets to pay for this content, but are still, using the fact that so many people out there don't value their own content and just give it away for free. So again, it's created this sort of like this feedback loop that now they can expect free stuff from everything. So initially when I saw this, I was like, okay, there's really nothing here that we haven't already talked about. But then there was a commenter at the bottom here who talked about something that I haven't really considered, is that, this is kind of the way it is. Like, this is the future. You have to not, put such the sort of idea now that you're, going to get commissioned for your work and it's going to be like this transaction and these licensing deals. That's sort of the way of the past. And the way of the now is that you build up a following via exposure, via getting your name out there, via, getting your trending, getting your Twitter, getting your Instagram followers. And then you leverage that following to do whatever you're going to do that earns you money, whether it be perhaps like a Patreon, or you sell merchandise, or like, for instance, Peter McKinnon is a very popular YouTuber nowadays. He just recently surpassed 1.5 million followers. He's a photographer and videographer, really, who is just, leveraged his sort of status in social media to kind of, I think, accelerate himself. So, again, I want to get kind of your take on this, Jokes. You've seen this industry, evolve over so long. And I mean, you've got your own actual, quite a decent following on YouTube and other sort of, social media platforms. So kind of give us the Joe McNally perspective on this sort of topic and sort of how you've seen the industry change over time.
Sure.
Easy question.
Yeah. No, it's, I'll try not to make a long answer out of this.
No, please do.
My counsel and wisdom, for whatever it's worth, for any photographer, is that nowadays in today's marketplace, you have to have a lot of lines in the water. And what we do is the lion's share of our income still comes from shooting. And I've pushed myself in the direction of commercial work as much as I possibly can. And in the realm of commercial work and ad agencies, yes, there's still like rights and rates and, discussions and contracts, and there's money to be made. There, people, it's not that they don't question it. There's always the back and forth, but they are fully attuned to the fact that, photography costs money. So there is kind of this, shining spot out there, but also in the wedding industry, et cetera, so you've got a photographer's life. If the pie chart of a photographer's life, you have to have shooting that is remunerative, that you hang on to your rights, that you insist on payment, et cetera. Then there's, the whole social media thing, which a lot of people are playing that game very, very well and pushing their presence. So certain companies start to look at them as potentially as an influencer, and maybe they will be offered assignments or some sort of social media participation in return for their collaboration. But we also, I also teach. I mean, I've been around for a while, so I do, my share of workshops, et cetera. I lecture. We have fine art representation with the Monroe Gallery in Santa Fe, which I'm very proud of. They've been my gallery now for 15 years. I'm not a huge player in the collectible print market, but we do sell some images. And then we have, beyond that, we have, done a couple, 2-3 books, so passive income becomes a part of a picture where you have stock sales. We are represented to a small degree by Getty, and then we sell stock directly out of the studio as well. Book sales or royalties that accrue, not lots of money at this point. A book goes downstream very quickly. You don't do a book for money, necessarily. But this, at the end of the year, this patchwork quilt has actually afforded you another year. What do you get out of this? All this hard work at the end of December. We always have a celebration at our studio. We made it through another year of photography. And we have a big dinner, and we invite family and friends of the studio, and we just celebrate the fact that we're still alive after another year of freelance photography. And then January hits. And I look at January as I have to get back on the tightrope and make it for another 12 months. So that's maybe not a completely direct answer. It is kind of this composite picture that we have pieced together at the studio. And that is valid for us, no one else necessarily. I'm sure there's photographers, there's high-end fashion photographers out there, for instance, who do nothing but shoot. And they're jetting off to Cannes and the French Riviera for shoots all the time. And that may be an amazing life. I'm sure it is. And then there's the social media, type of a photographer, Humans of New York, for instance, has become a huge, Instagram following, et cetera. And so people who have created a niche for themselves that becomes powerful and noticeable. There's that approach. And that is, I guess, you would call it a form of marketing. So you do have a brand, and how you choose to project that brand into the marketplace can take on many shapes and forms.
Right. So, I mean, basically saying is you wouldn't necessarily be able to, or you could, but, for you personally, you found it that you need to have that diversity, right? Could you just be doing the shooting and the photography? Or do you prefer to have the diversity, to have the books, to have the social media, the Joe McNally branding and all that stuff? Is that even a choice, or is that just the way it is?
I think it's the way we started to slide is probably not the right word for it, but the direction became apparent to us quite a number of years ago. I started a blog. I actually enjoyed the blog. I was a writing major at Syracuse. My undergrad, I was a writing major. And I found I enjoyed that. And I found the interaction to be interesting. And I've always enjoyed the company of photographers. So that social media thing became part of our picture, sort of de facto. And it also gives us a voice in the industry. If we want to announce a workshop, if we want to comment on something, if we want to amplify a fellow photographer's message, I retweet other photographers, all the time, people I think are important in the industry. The Bill Epridge has a site. Bill has passed on now, but a very intelligent sort of, accumulation of his photographs over the years that are being again put out in social media, so that a whole new generation of photographers can become familiar with his work. Adrian, who was Bill's longtime partner, manages his estate, and she put out a picture that Bill made. It was an astonishing photograph. It was at dusk. I believe it was shot in LA. The Senator, Robert F. Kennedy, is standing on a car, and he's swarmed by people during the campaign. I mean, they're right up there. They're reaching for his hand. His security was the offensive line of the Los Angeles Rams, Rosie Greer and those folks. And it was dusk and this beautiful color and people reaching for him and right up close to him. And it was sweaty politics at its best. He was reaching people. And I bought the print. I called up Monroe. Monroe is represents Bill's work. And I said, I have to have that print, because to me it was hopeful in our season of discontent. I have that on my wall, and it gives me hope. And so yeah, I mean, putting stuff out there works, because I had forgotten about that image. So yeah, people like David Burnett's on Facebook, and his stories of the encounters that he's had, shooting cover stories for Time. He was the first photographer to get inside with Ayatollah Khomeini, when in the beginnings of the Iran crisis. And this was magazines in full cry. He called up Time. He was coming back from, I don't know, some really obscure location. I'm probably getting this a bit wrong, but he had to connect through Tehran. And he looked around at Tehran, and David's a wonderful journalist. And he said, something's going to happen here. And he called up Time, and they said, stay. We'll fund you. Just stay. And so he stayed. Yeah. And sure enough, something did happen, right? So those stories are part of our legend and lore. So David regularly discusses that on Facebook. It's wonderful. His feed is wonderful. Jimmy Colton, legendary picture editor. His perspective I find incredibly valuable. And then there's also, younger photographers are coming along who are using social media to good advantage and putting their work out. So this mix, this wash, some of it's dreck, let's face it. Some of the, I mean, I'm really not interested in Facebook pictures of what you had for breakfast. Just saying. But it's a way to re-up history, and it's a way to mix the old and the new. So I find it valuable.
Yeah, I would say if you're growing up in the industry nowadays, if you've got that sort of, safety net with regard to living at home, growing up, high school student, college student, yeah, give away your stuff for free to a degree, like put your stuff out there, get that exposure. That's where it helps. But, you can't do anything with that once you leave. If you didn't build it up while you could, then, you're just kind of screwing over everybody else in the industry. Even then, I mean, that's bad advice. So I shouldn't be telling college kids to give away their stuff for free, because then that's still going to perpetuate the issue.
Well, here's the thing. It's an individual decision. I've done assignments where I made a bad financial deal because I just needed to shoot. It's an individual decision that each photographer has to make. I don't put up a brick wall and say, don't ever do this, because there might be an occasion that comes along where the financial deal is bad, but the photographic arrangement or the photographic possibilities are so rich that that if you go through this, I call them gateway assignments. On the other side of that assignment, you'll be a different photographer. Yeah. Photographers use their own money oftentimes to pump things up. You'll find that you will be able to sell a story or an idea to an entity, a magazine, a corporation, or something like that, much easier if you've got a piece of it already shot. Yeah. And that sometimes requires investment. I invest in my own eye. I self-assign all the time. And that is, you could say, like, sometimes, I look at as you were, Zach, looking at that month that comes up like, oh, wow, I probably shouldn't have gone off for 2 weeks for absolutely no money and tried that. Yeah. But at the same time, your eye is richer and healthier because of it, and you remain alive as a photographer with a beating heart, even though you are at risk. Let's face it, this career is oftentimes about risk. Mm-hmm. You have to kind of suck it up and realize some months are going to be kind of lean. Yeah. And you alluded to Faces Ground Zero, earlier this year, Dave, or earlier in my career, and around 9/11, and I was no different than a lot of people at 9/11 or freelance photographers. My studio was dead in the water. Nobody was giving out assignments. I crafted that assignment. I took no fee to shoot it. We took all of the money that Time Inc. gave us, and we threw it at the camera, because every exposure I made of that camera was $300.
Wow.
So click, $300. Click, yeah. $300. So crazy. The entire process of doing that was an expensive one, and we used every dime we could to fund the staff and the process. And I didn't take a fee for it. Yeah. And
I would be so mad if somebody blinked. Like, that's a $300 blink. You cost me $300.
Dare I ask, do you remember how many? I mean, it's very off topic, but do you remember how many images you had to throw away?
Well, we didn't. throw any away per se.
Yeah.
You know, even the out of focus ones we kept. You know, there's only a half an inch of depth of field in that camera at f/45.
Wow.
And the person I went to the most number of Polaroids for was a gentleman who was a probationary firefighter. His first day of work was 9/11.
Wow.
If you can imagine going to work and having a priest give you last rites and then get on a bus. And he is now, I believe, the youngest chief in the history of FDNY. And we kind of second guessed each other, you know, because I had to shoot in camera obscura because the Polaroid camera had no lens, excuse me, had a lens, forgive me, had no shutter. So we had to go black in the studio. And then I pulled a cap off of this giant lens and made an exposure with a Mamiya RZ67, which was bore-sighted underneath the giant Polaroid camera, and I was shooting a vertical 6x7. So I got an instantaneous dupe. I got a giant Polaroid and a 6x7 piece of film. And
cool. Yeah.
the book came from the 6x7s. And so, you know, in the dark, Jason was trying to keep his eyes open. And so the first two shots were bug-eyed.
God.
And then I thought I'd fool him. And I was giving him a count of 3. And I thought, okay, he's going to screw this up. So I fired on 2, and his eyes were closed.
Oh.
So I outthought myself. And then I finally got a good one on the 4th one. And his fellow firefighters were not kind. He was a probationary firefighter. They were like, you asshole, you just cost him more money than you make. And, you know, oh, man. It was you know, not kind. You know, a moment for Jason there with his fellow firefighters in the studio.
So but it's a good $1,200 story though.
Yes.
It'd be funny if like the guy took out his wallet, like, listen, I got $5. I'll pay you. I'm so sorry. That's awesome. Yeah. So I mean, you know, talking about like trading experiences for money, I would definitely do that for, you know, I think that's a lot of people why they shoot for NGOs, you know, because it's like it gives them access to these incredible places that incredible stories are happening that they normally wouldn't be able to get to. And I think, yeah, if you get that opportunity, take it. You know, opportunity is just as almost as valuable as money in certain instances, not obviously in all of them, but yeah, opportunity, you know, if you get a great opportunity, take it. Like I said, it's only going to improve your eye. But what I was going to close with, Joe, was, you know, talking about, you know, again, we're talking about social media, we're talking about following. I was looking at your YouTube channel. Obviously, you look like you've been posting some stuff a little bit more recently. You know, a lot of you know, people are out there, you know, building up like YouTube channels, doing video and stuff like that. Is that something you want to pursue at all, or you're just happy doing the photo work and letting the vloggers do the vlogs, like we mentioned, Peter McKinnon and his channel, and other folks who are, you know, trying to leverage sort of that space? Is video anywhere you want to go with your career at this point, or you're just going to stick around with the photography? It's what you know and love, and you're good at it, and it's what people hire you for.
No, I think you have to keep moving forward, or you get left behind. That's fairly logical sort of set of circumstances there. Like I've got an enormous capacity to state the obvious, but you know, no, we are moving actively in a video direction. We're very engaged with our YouTube channel. I'm blessed that Annie Cahill, who is also my wife, works with the studio, and she's our director of social media and marketing. So she is really, really good at identifying trends. And so I do all my own social media. I do all my own posting. I do all my own writing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Annie looks around and she formulates notions, ideas, trends. She organized my Instagram. Like when I was doing my Instagram before, she was the director of the professional division at Adorama Camera for a number of years, and essentially created the professional division for them. Prior to that, she was a Nikon tech rep for 12 years, which is where we met. But when she joined the studio, I was like sending out an Instagram, like, oh, that's a cool picture. Yeah. Next day, like, you know, I'd have a dance picture, I'd have a news picture, I'd have an animal picture or whatever. You know, it's just no coherence whatsoever. And she was like, you need to focus, and you need to do series and stories. And that has been a powerful thing for our Instagram account. So having that input from her is really, really amazing. You know, we're a team. We work this out. I have Lynn, who's the studio manager, and Annie, who runs social media marketing, and then we have Callie, who's our crew chief. So we are a very small but tight-knit group, and we find we are going forward as best as we can. Like I'm going to Cuba on Monday, and one of the things I'm doing down there is shooting a short film, very short film, just a very modest effort on the Cuban dance community. So we are actively pursuing video. Is a long-winded way of saying that.
Are you using are you using the Nikons? Because the 4K.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one reason I'm completely. I just upgraded to the 750, and I'm dying to get the 850 the moment I can, the moment I can, because the video looks incredible. Which I'm so happy that Nikon's really kind of stepping up their game on that, and hopefully we'll get like the Nikon equivalent of the Canon C100 one day, which I'd love.
Yeah, for us, the D850 is a real game changer. The resolution, the speed, the combination of elements really, really has affected the way I shoot. And I'm really looking forward. Again, for me, video is still a bit of a new world, and I'm learning as I go. But I'm very intrigued by it, and we are actively engaged across the board, and the video aspects of our YouTube channel, and also still maintaining our Instagram presence, etc.
I know you probably can't talk about other cameras, and I'm not going to ask you about any specific brands, but I am curious what your thoughts are on Micro Four Thirds as a platform. Is that something you've played around with, or are intrigued by, or are you just happy with the full frame stuff?
I'm very happy with full frame, and Micro Four Thirds is, I really, that's the first time I've ever heard that phrase, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
I mean, crop sensor cameras, I've used forever, the D500, for instance. D500 was fantastic at Rio because I'd put a 200 f2 on a D500, and I had the equivalent of, much longer, we could bang that out to almost 400 mil, as an f2 lens, fantastic, So Micro Four Thirds and the whole new world of mirrorless cameras, etc., something I have yet to dip my toe into those waters.
Okay, great. Well, we're nearing the end of our show. Joe, is there anything you'd like to plug? Obviously, we talked about the box for the flash, but is there anything else you'd like to plug? Any particular websites? Obviously, your own website, or are you going to be doing any showcases or any, I would say, any workshops in the near future that we can look out for you on and maybe attend?
Sure. I mean, shameless self-promotion. Here we go. We go forward. Tune into the blog. Tune into our channels. We're teaching again in Hawaii. Here's a fun reward, if you will, for having slogged it out in this business for nearly 40 years and staying at the Motel 6 by the airport, oftentimes, which is what magazines will oftentimes. I've been invited for the third year in a row to teach at the Four Seasons in Hawaii, the Four Seasons Hualalai, which is one of the nicest resorts in the world. And they 3 years ago, we started a relationship, and they've invited us back every year now. And it's not for everybody, because it's obviously this kind of amazing place. And Annie and I are like, whoa, pinching ourselves, that we're here. But it's a beautiful place to teach photography, and I'm really looking forward to that. And we do put a lot of effort into our Instagram account, Joe McNally Photo, over on Instagram. We think about it, and we try to be thoughtful with it and just express ourselves via good photography there as best as we can.
That's great. Speaking of wonderful, or not wonderful, but speaking of, interesting, beautiful places, Dubai. You ever been to Dubai?
Many times.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I've taught at Gulf Photo Plus many times, and I've probably been to Dubai probably 10 times.
Oh, wow.
And it's this amazing city that just, like, all the steel and glass just sprang out of the desert. It's a pretty incredible place.
What's the indoor ski slope like?
It's like so many things in Dubai. It's completely strange.
Just stay in one of those like 7-star hotels that are so famous.
No, I stayed relentlessly in a Holiday Inn.
Oh my God. A 7-star Holiday
In a place. Yeah, no. There were many nights that it was maybe a couple of maybe half stars there. I don't know.
Oh no.
Wow.
No. They're fine. They're fine. It's a funny place because there's a Holiday Inn in this place called Internet City, where the internet is actually not that very good. It's kind of wild, but the workshop was wonderful. You didn't go for the accommodations; you went for the camaraderie of your fellow instructors. A lot of good people taught there. Again, I mentioned Dave Burnett came over there. Ed Kashi is, has taught there a number of times, and as well as people representing various disciplines and genre, Photoshop, lighting. Zach Arias has been there. David Hobby has been there. So young photographer who was my first assistant for quite a number of years, Drew Gurian, has taught there, and Drew is now becoming a very successful rock and roll photographer living in Brooklyn.
Wow.
So he's a good example of a young photographer who is actually really making progress. He's shooting for Red Bull, he's shooting bands, he's liaisoning with managers, and is really carving out a niche for himself in the music scene. So it is possible. There is this mix of a future out there. It's not the future that I faced when I first picked up a camera, but it's still very vibrant. And it's still very worthwhile.
Definitely. All right. Well, before we get out of here, Zach, anything you want to throw out there? Anything interesting news-wise going on with you?
Nope. Just covered the Women's March in DC for Nation of Change again. So you can go to nationchange.org and check that out. But nothing that amazing.
Was the Women's March as good as it was? You went to the one last year, right? How did it compare?
This in Washington D.C. it was much smaller than previous year. I mean, last year it was 450,000 people. I think this year 10, 12, 15 maybe tops.
Oh, wow.
But in Chicago it was over 200,000 or 300,000 people. In L.A. it was, I think, 500,000. I mean, it was still incredible numbers. I was surprised that in DC it was comparably small, especially considering the man they were usually protesting was actually in the House this weekend. Which is always a surprising thing when you're doing protests and the president's actually home. But yeah, it was smaller, but this time it could actually get more photography. Last year, when you're covering 450,000 people marching through the streets of DC, it's actually kind of difficult to get anything other than just like wide shots or something like that, or way too close shots usually.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The biggest thing I remember from the protest was nothing but sign shots. Like on Reddit, it was all just like, oh, here's an interesting sign.
Oh God, thank you for reminding me. I actually pitched my site a best signs of Women's March, and I haven't followed through on that yet. So
nice. There you go.
Yeah, that was great.
Look for that out on vizu.news.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, I want to thank our guest, Joe McNally. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. It's been truly an honor. You're always welcome back. And again, I'm so grateful you took the time out to be a part of Around the Lens. We truly appreciate it. It's been wonderful talking to you. And this has been episode 108 of Around the Lens. I have been your host, David J. Murphy. Again, join us next week. We're going to have a great show with, I believe, Stephanie Keith, talking to us all about her photography and her projects that she's working on. So that should be a fun episode. So again, Joe, thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it very much.
And for Zach Roberts, I am David J. Murphy. This has been episode Around the Lens, episode 108, and we are out.